At this time, Chair lays out House Bill 3948. Chair offers a committee substitute to House Bill 3948 and recognizes Chairman King to explain the bill and the substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for the opportunity. Thank you for laying out that committee substitute, which is quite a bit different from the filed version of the bill, fortunately. My layouts are normally pretty brief, but I want to take just a minute to go through the changes for your benefit, as well as those in the audience that may be considering testifying. So in 2019, in the year of our Lord 2019, we passed HB 1325, creating the Texas Hemp Program to be in line with the federal law and enable Texas farmers to participate in the rapidly growing market with industrial hemp and consumable hemp. House Bill 1325 authorized the Texas Department of Agriculture to have primary regulatory authority over hemp production in the state, as well as placing regulatory authority with the Department of State Health Services to provide oversight of the consumable hemp products. Now, House Bill 3948 was intended to, it's the same bill that was filed in the Senate, by the way, by Senator Perry, and I just filed the House version for him. He asked me to. House Bill 3948 was intended to update and fine-tune the Texas Hemp Program to comply with new USDA rules. As filed, some of the highlights of the bill include extending the amount of time a license holder has before harvesting a crop from 20 to 30 days after pre-harvest samples are taken. This matches with the USDA rules, which is overlying concern, at least on my part. I want to match and be in sync with the federal rules to make it a lot better program and easier for people to work with. Specifying requirements for hemp research programs at higher education institutions to ensure programs not harvesting hemp for sale in the marketplace do not have to comply with burdensome pre-harvest testing requirements. Expanding seed certification to include plant varieties to clarify seedlings and cuttings may be planted. To create a consumable hemp account to be administered by dishes to be used for the enforcement of the consumable hemp rules. And penalties have also been added to address a person growing hemp without a proper license. Now, the committee substitute we developed to address some concerns that were brought to us by members of the industry, which are working hard to develop this industry, and they know what's working and what's not working better than any of us. So the substitute strikes Section 10, 11, 18, and 19, as well as part of Section 12. So it goes from a 13-page bill to a 9-page bill, which we removed after receiving feedback that these sections would significantly harm the industries. Briefly, the sections that we struck, Sections 10 and 11, we removed additional penalties for growing without a license. TDA expressed concerns about restricting farmers when hemp is such a new crop. Section 12, we removed language that sets a maximum THC content that is more restrictive than the federal guidelines, which would place us at a deep disadvantage to the other states that are building a burgeoning industrial hemp business. Section 18, we removed a registration requirement for out-of-state distributors. We feel like it is overly burdensome, bureaucratic, and unnecessary. And Section 19, we removed language requiring Texas hemp labeling to be grown and processed completely in this state. This industry, that's a great and noble thing, and they do that in some places, but we just don't have enough hemp. We haven't matured enough. We don't have enough processing facilities for that to be realistic. So the industry is immature and not ready for such a standard. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know that there are folks from the hemp industry here who can testify and provide more detail on the individual situations for the members of the public who have come today. And for each of the members, they can do a better job. And I want to just say, for those of you that are here to testify today, I know this committee's time is very, very valuable. And I think the substitute has addressed all the concerns that anybody had. And of course, there's always people that, want to be able to grow marijuana, and it's not a marijuana bill. This is an industrial hemp bill, and we get it, and I understand that. But so I would just encourage everybody that does testify to keep their comments brief. So at this time, I'll be glad to answer any questions that the committee members may have.
Thank you very much for that explanation of the sub. Are there any questions for the author? Yes, sir. Representative Rosenthal.
Mr. King, does this mean I still can't grow marijuana?
Not legally.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. King. We'll
You're
bring you
welcome.
up to
I
close.
reserve it. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. All right. Chair calls Benjamin Meggs. If you could please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Ben Meggs. I'm here representing my company, Bayou City Hemp Company, and the Texas Hemp Coalition. I'm in support of HB 3948. So this past year has been one that's been a learning curve for everyone involved in Texas hemp. As a backgrounder, I'm co-founder of Bayou City Hemp Company, the largest CO2 hemp extraction facility in Texas, and we're located in Houston. The extraction side of the hemp industry puts us in a very unique position where we get to see the market both from the farmer side, as we buy their Texas biomass, and the bulk market, both here in Texas and nationally, as well as the retail side of the market. So we kind of get to see all sides of it. And without sales on the retail side of this industry, the hemp farmers and hemp processors don't have much of a demand. The price of biomass for the farmer and bulk oils isolates for processors like ourselves over the last year is down. While the industry still projects a large sales growth rate in the hemp industry, the recent price crash, along with Texas being a little late to the industry, is one of the reasons why it's imperative to keep our Texas hemp rolls as open as possible. Without a free market in the hemp industry here in Texas, it will kill an already margin-tight industry. Bayou City has outlaid the capital and built the infrastructure necessary to help both the Texas farmer and the Texas retailer, and we're very proud to bring this infrastructure to the state of Texas. Please keep all this in mind as you make pertinent decisions moving forward. A few points to the bill that I'd like to point out, which have been very well thought out and instrumental, not only to our company's success, but the success of the industry as a whole. This legislation gives TDA the ability to write rules that reflect the USDA final rules so that we as a state can be compliant. It's also going to give the industry an opportunity to be competitive with other states. As mentioned earlier, the farmer will have an expanded harvest at 30 days post pre-harvest sample collection as opposed to the 20 days in the prior bill. This will allow the Texas farmers to fall in line with the federal guidelines. In an industry in its infancy, with lessons and knowledge being learned every day, this extra time will certainly help the many farmers that are trying their hand at this new cash crop. Under current laws and regulations, hemp crop testing above 0.3 must be hemp crops testing above 0.3 must be destroyed. This problem could be remedied by changing the statutory definition of hemp, raising the THC limit from 0.3 to 0.1, and if the Hemp Act is adopted federally, this will allow Texas to follow suit and be competitive on a national level. And then, let's see, testing of microorganisms is very important to the industry. At Bayou City, we use supercritical CO2, so many of these microorganisms are removed during the processing. So HB 3948 will allow for real-time changes in testing procedures and requirements where these microorganisms would be inevitably destroyed or removed during the processing. And with that, I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide some testimony on the state of the industry and the market of hemp and CBD.
You bet. All right. Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Representative Cole.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give me some insight on how we're at a disadvantage with other states by not passing this legislation?
No, passing this legislation will be very advantageous. What's been put forward by what was originally put forward would not be advantageous. What Representative King has put forward would be very advantageous.
And what problem is it solving?
I'm sorry?
What problem is it solving in terms of our competition with other states?
It's just keeping the market open where we can allow for real-time changes. So if the federal rules changes, the USDA guidelines, this gives us the ability to change those without having to be in a legislative session.
Okay.
Any other question? I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So just to follow up on Representative Cole's question, for example, you have I guess a growing season or a harvest season.
Yes, sir.
And and there's a federal season as well, correct? And those don't match up. We set ours based on what on an original rule that was carried at the federal level, and then that changed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And this would allow us to adapt, for example, if that changes further.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Great. Good question. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? We'll call the next witness. Thank you very much for being here. Chair calls Jesse Kearns. You can state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Jesse Kearns. I reside in Oak Cliff. I'm the Director of New Markets for New Bloom Labs and the Vice President of the Texas Hemp Coalition. I'm here in support of House Bill 3948, which improves Texas's hemp production rules in the context of recent updates and mandates handed down by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. My company, New Bloom Labs, is a third-party analytical laboratory located in Dallas. My company's role is to ensure that hemp products are legally compliant, labeled correctly, and free of toxins. In other words, we make sure that hemp is consumer safe. In order to prove that a cannabis crop grown in Texas is hemp rather than federally scheduled cannabis, growers will order a final crop test with our laboratory that determines the total THC levels in their plant material. If the total THC level is below 0.3%, then the Department of Ag declares the crop clear for harvest. In the current law, Texas requires that crops are harvested within 20 days of this final legal hurdle. However, in its recently finalized hemp production rules, the USDA allows for a 30-day window for crop harvests after a grower conducts their final potency test. With regard to this post-testing harvest window, House Bill 3948 brings Texas into alignment with the national standards set by the USDA at 30 days. If the state were to decline to adopt this important rule update, it would put Texas hemp growers at a disadvantage in nationwide hemp markets and would present undue hardships in the event of extreme weather or other potential obstacles to completion of harvest. On the whole, House Bill 3948, as presented here today, is supportive of this new and important agricultural industry in Texas. This extension to the national standard 30-day harvest window, among many other updates contained within this bill, is important for the continued growth and competitiveness of this novel and growing agricultural commodity in Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge each member's support of House Bill 3948. Thank you very much for your time.
Very good. Any questions for this witness? We appreciate your testimony.
No problem.
Chair calls Aaron Owens. If you could state your name, your position on the bill, who you represent, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chairman Burns and committee members. I'm Aaron Owens. I'm currently serving as an executive board member of the Texas Hemp Coalition. I'm also the owner and operator of Tejas Hemp, which is headquartered in Dripping Springs. I am here in support of the committee substitute for House Bill 3948. Born and raised in San Angelo, spent the last 15 years raising Coriani cattle and Spanish goats out in West Texas, south of Ozona. After the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, as well as Texas legalizing the production of hemp, I excitedly dove in and produced 2 acres of boutique hemp in 2020. Prior to the development of the ancillary mechanisms of the more industrial side of the hemp industry in Texas, and in the U.S. for that matter, I quickly narrowed in that the reality of a profit in hemp would require being derived from a boutique cannabinoid production intended for the consumable market. This led me to organically produce 4,000 plants of a boutique variety in Dripping Springs on 2 acres. After facing the everyday challenges of farming by hand, I was also faced with introducing newly developed genetics into a warm and wonderful southern climate. Contradictory to my optimism, I only yielded 50% of what I was expecting due to a combination of these young genetics in this new climate. My final harvest was around 2,500 pounds and is currently being extracted locally here in Texas. We are converting my material into an oil that is comparable to what most would know as a CBD oil. I share these details to shed light on the reality of a 2020 Texas hemp farmer. This early in the development of our industry, as the farmer, we are forced to think ahead in terms of the supply chain beyond the simplicities of just farming. We are much different than our traditional ag-producing neighbors in that we don't get to monetize our product by simply dropping it off at the local sale barn or grain bin. Instead, we are forced to develop, produce, and execute our own genetics for this area, work with a third party to extract our material, and then take it upon ourselves to get our product to the market. I'm here today testifying in support of the committee substitute for HB 3090-48 with a specific focus on 2 points. The most important from my perspective is extending the harvest window for final testing from 20 to 30 days. This is in compliance with the USDA federal rules and allows the farmer the best chance possible to successfully navigate the physical, political, and real-life challenges of having their plants tested and documents prepared for a compliant harvest. In regard to the certification of genetics, I also want to speak in support of allowing the certification of not only seeds, but also now of plants or cuttings or transplants, as Mr. King mentioned. This enables the Texas farmer to utilize their relationships to procure stable genetics in the form of transplants, reducing the infrastructure requirements to germinate their own seed of these higher value crops. Although not in this bill, I just want to bring up one other point, and that is because it'll be coming down the pipeline soon, and that is the concept of raising the total THC limit from 0.3 to 1%. As we move forward, it will be ideal to allow the TDA to make these types of rule changes in an effort to increase the success rates of the Texas farmer. Ultimately, we ask the legislature to continue to be in compliance with the USDA federal guidelines rather than further restrict us on a state level. This allows us, the Texas hemp producer, the fairest chance of competing and creating a profit in both the national and international markets. We ask that the legislature support the committee substitute for HB 3948, as it is what is best for the Texas farmer as well as our emerging industry. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the witness? Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Chair calls Elias Jackson. Wasn't sure if it was Elias or Elias, but
It's Elias.
okay. Well, if you could please restate your name for us, your position on the bill, and who you represent, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, I'm Dr. Elias Jackson, representing Farm Biopharmaceuticals out of the Texas Medical Center. I am in support of House Bill 3948. Farm was awarded the only federal patent for the evaluation of cannabinoid-based products in 2014. And we are absolutely in support of this bill with the following amendments. We feel that the bill should incorporate a trace, track, and certification program. The Texas Department of State Health Services has established a manufacturing licensing program for consumable hemp products and creating a registration process for retailers selling consumable hemp products containing CBD. CBD is an active pharmaceutical ingredient, and products containing it should be included in a trace, track, and certification system. Our goal here is to make Texas the #1 state in the hemp industry. And the way we can do that is by incorporating this small trace, track certification system. The problem now is that our growers, producers are now faced with putting products on the market and competing against bad players. Our patent has allowed us to communicate with other states as well as federal legislatures. And what we've come to find is that the illegal players, such as if we want to look at California, have now created a gray market. If we are proactive, since we're so early on in this game, we can curve out that situation and really make Texas the gold standard in which the entire nation would follow. Creating a hemp trace, track, and certification program creates standards for hemp products and will establish safety standards for our growers and our hemp products, as well as for our consumers, protecting them from unsafe and harmful products. Our producers here in the state are some of the best in the nation, but they must be able to protect themselves as they go into the market. As now, we can go to any gas station and see CBD products, of which we have no idea what's in them. As a member of the Texas Medical Center Innovation Institute and the only company with the only awarded patent for the evaluation of these products, I stand before you as an expert saying that HB 3948 is a great bill and we support it, but it must be amended to add a certification program. This certification program will give us benefits across the entire industry here in Texas. One, from public health and public safety. The system would deploy an integrated system for evaluating consumable hemp products for public safety, quality control, and quality assurance purposes. For transparency, the system would provide licensed manufacturers and other industry stakeholders with the confidence in a uniform regulatory framework, clear set of regulatory standards for state approval. This will provide the Texas law enforcement regulators oversight and control over that gray market in which I'm talking about. In the state of California, we recently had a conversation with the regulators there, and it seems that the illegal market is far more advantageous than being in the legal market. And we don't want that here in Texas. And finally, economic benefits. Trace Track and Certification Program will address issues relating to risk mitigation, industry economic instability, and tax fee inconsistencies. We were asked a question several weeks ago, well, how can you tell if there are any harmful substances now? Well, we can't because currently we don't have a system in place to where as you guys, as you make these tough decisions, have at least the baseline data as to what is in the substances that are currently being sold as you go to your gas station and CBD shops. We don't really need outside players destroying the industry here in Texas. I think that the growers, the producers, the manufacturers here in Texas should have the right to be the gold standard in the nation. Our goal is to make the nation come to Texas to ask, how did you guys do that? And by installing and amending and adding a certification program, which is not a huge addition for our growers, but it gives everyone the protection moving forward. So I thank you for this time, and I am open for any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Yes, sir. Representative Rosenthal.
Dr. Jackson, thanks for coming here today. Thanks for visiting with me the other day. And actually, I appreciate your testimony here, even more than the office visit we had, because for somebody like me, it's a little enlightening. In the business that I work in as an engineer, we test everything. And everything is testable and traceable to an identifiable standard. And usually for us, that's a national standard of some kind.
Yeah.
So that's basically what you're proposing here, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to say for the companies that we have now, our testers here, they're doing a great job. However, for the state, we don't have a certification program. There's absolutely, I feel it's unethical for us.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's my very next question is, for the people who are testing now, it's not that they're doing anything wrong, but we don't have a standard for all of them.
Absolutely. So
someone could actually claim to be testing and label these products without violating a law, and we still would not know what's in the little bottle that you buy at the corner store or the hemp, the CBD store down the street, right?
absolutely. And you can have all the best intentions in the world. It's not a condemnation of the practices currently being done. What it is that we haven't established that certification system that would ultimately protect those testers, growers, and producers themselves as they move forward.
So the certification would be for the folks who are doing the testing, not necessarily the growers or the stores.
Well, a certification program, so it's just like being able to have a certification system where a labeling is on those products. So now if law enforcement goes in, they can immediately take out those gray market players. The growers have the confidence of the fact that in competition, their product is not standing next to a illegal player, and they can garner the majority of the revenues from the market here. In addition to that, from a consumer, you now have the confidence that these products have those symbols or that certification that when I purchase it, it is of high level grade. And then finally, as when we look at the ability to have a certification program, the overall industry will begin to look at Texas, and we will be the number one because currently there's no program that incorporates this except for if we go into traditional pharmaceuticals. So it's like if you buy Tylenol here or buy Tylenol in Houston, we know it's the same. And we just need to have that small addition to now raise the value of the entire industry here in Texas.
Very good. So, and my last question is going to be, while testing, I feel like would improve the safety and our confidence in our products, also make the good players more competitive by removing some of the bad players. I got to ask, if we're going to regulate and test, what does that add a layer of cost to this industry that other states and other areas are not going to be dealing with?
Well, the goal here is not to over-regulate, because that's the situation in California. The goal here is to add just a small level of certification. Now, whenever you add an addition, there may be a small increase, but what will happen is by getting rid of those bad players, the actual revenues will increase, so the cost will eventually go down. But we would have to get together to look to see how can we make sure that those producers and manufacturers aren't being levied a higher cost in their production. So a certification program would really focus at the level of the Department of State Health Services.
So that's actually, I wasn't going to ask that question, but you brought that up. So it would be Department of Safety Health Services would have to administer this program.
Yes. And current.
That would probably add a fiscal responsibility from the state side.
Right, exactly. And it would also alleviate those issues concerning uniformity across the whole system. And by focusing on it at the Department of State Health Services, it will relieve any type of extra burden on the growers and producers who are now blazing a trail, really. And of course, there's growing pains associated with opening a novel industry, and we want to make sure that they don't have any more issues in producing their products. But a certification program is absolutely important proactively, because as we can see with other states, trying to do it reactively is not a smart
You want to
choice.
build the system in as the industry grows.
As the industry grows, and then we can ensure that Texas is, as far as the gold standard, all the states would want to come here, all the producers would want to come here, and now we can control that pipeline as the industry grows here in Texas.
Very good. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions?
Any other questions? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Chair calls WT Skip Leak. If you could please state your name, your position on the bill, and who you represent, please.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Skip Leak. I represent Prime My Body. I am neutral on the original bill and for the substitute committee, and I yield the rest of my time.
All right, one moment. So would you prefer for us to change your position on the bill to for the bill?
Yes,
Okay, we
For
have
the
permission to
substitute.
do that. All right.
I was unaware of the substitute till this morning.
I got you. Well, then the record will reflect your position as for the bill. And are there any questions for the witness? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you bet. Chair calls Zachary Maxwell. You can state your name, your position on the bill, and who you represent, please.
Sure thing. My name's Zachary Maxwell. I'm the president of Texas Hemp Growers, And I originally signed up against this bill, but because a substitute has been introduced there, we would like to change our position to for that bill. I actually don't have too much to add since the substitute bill has been introduced. Most of our concerns have been addressed there. I do want to comment on the last speaker's stuff about the certification. There are already nonprofit organizations out there like the U.S. Hemp Authority that offer certification programs, much like many other industries do. We would prefer that the state stay out of certification programs because it does add costs there to the industry. The bill there is a good bill that y'all have in front of you. Our only concern that wasn't addressed in this bill that we would hopefully like to see the state look into is the fact that TDA is charging a fee for transporting hemp, and that does go against the word of the state law. That fee is $75, one transportation manifest to one destination. For our farmers, and we represent over 250 members in this industry, from farmers to processors, retailers, the whole 9 yards. Our farmers are getting hammered right now by the illegal $75 fee that's being foisted on them. And we would hope that maybe the state could address that in maybe a cleanup version of this bill. So otherwise, we're in full support of this, and we hope that you guys would view it favorably and vote it out of committee. Thank you.
Okay, and just a point of clarification, we're going to change your position on the bill to for the bill.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, we have your permission to do that.
Yes, you do.
Thank you very
I
much.
have a question.
Any questions? Yes, Representative Cole.
Can you explain why exactly you think the state should stay out of the certification process?
Because I'm a big proponent that the private sector can do it better.
Yes, sir. Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you for coming today, and appreciate you recognizing this bill's author for the work that they did to get that bill, to bring people on board. I think Representative King has done a really good job. But I want to follow up Representative Cole's question with you. If we use third parties, as I imagine other states do, first, do you think we should mandate the use of a certification program from the state?
No, I do not.
All right, so if we don't, then some producers, manufacturers, processors, packagers will seek third-party verification and some will not, right?
Correct.
So right there is kind of my argument. But even if we didn't mandate it in some way or have it go through the state, how do we verify that these certification programs all work to a consistent set of standards?
Well, it's still really early in the industry, right? And so it's really my personal opinion that industry participants should be the ones that make those decisions as far as how do we set standards there. One thing I would point out that was brought up by the last speaker that wasn't exactly accurate is that the state law already mandates that any product sold by a retailer in this state has to have a full panel test with it. That full panel test provides you not just what's in that product, but if there's any contaminants, microbial contaminants, yeast, anything like that, pesticides. So there is language in the current state statute that allows some of this information to be shared through, like a centralized police database. We certainly are all in favor of readily available documentation being made available in some kind of third-party state database that can be searched. But, as far as actually mandating every company and every farmer in the state have to go through a specific certification, we don't support that.
Okay, and I get that. So you say that it's already in current statute, but seems to me like a lot of this stuff is sold without that kind of information being easily available to the public.
If it's being sold without that information being made available to the public, it can be reported to the Department of State Health Services, and there are penalties for retailers that are selling products without the proper labels on it.
See, I agree that the people in the industry should be part of the process for figuring out how we deal with these things, because y'all are the ones that have it in your hands.
Correct.
You work with it all the time. But I also think if we don't have a consistent set of standards, we're setting ourselves up for a potentially problematic situation.
Sure, and as I mentioned earlier, we actually are seeing national nonprofit groups that are starting to develop. That U.S. Hemp Authority standard that I just mentioned, it's like a 300-page manual that they've come up with certifying every stage of the industry. Not only that, I would also point out that labs, testing labs, for example, they're technically required under the law to meet ISO accreditations already. So, you know, it's not just a lawless, you know, industry out there right now. There are some standards that are in place that protect consumers, and as we've seen in the past, the bad actors often get culled out by the industry because there are industry participants that often will call that kind of activity out, including ourselves.
Very good, thank you.
I believe you have one more question here.
Yeah, just a quick question. As the president of the organization there, are you in agreement with as far as protecting the public, increasing the THC from 0.3 to 1 point something?
Yes. So there is a bill that's been introduced in Congress by Rand Paul, and that would actually raise that federal THC limit from 0.3 to 1%. That would protect our farmers simply because when they go over that 0.3%, they're at risk at that point of having to destroy that crop. And these crops, an acre is going to cost you about $7,500 to $10,000 in inputs just to get it off the ground. So if that metric was raised to 1%, it would pretty much eliminate anybody going hot in their fields.
The reason I asked, there certainly was a standard, so to speak, during this whole process of legalizing hemp production, that 0.3, it's safe. Now it's not so concerned about, now we can go to 1.
Well, and I should clarify for you that 0.3% number is not based in anything. That was a number that was, quite frankly, plucked out of the air by federal regulators. No industry association, there's absolutely no documentation whatsoever that backs up this idea that 0.3 is the number. So that's not us or the industry that have ever called that the number. Clear.
Well, actually, the industry or those that were interested in legalizing hemp were preaching that from the get-go.
They might have been preaching it as a way to reinforce that we're not passing marijuana, but to your specific question about whether 0.3 and 1% is, you know, some kind of major difference there, it isn't. And for this industry, we certainly support a higher benchmark that allows our farmers to clear those state tests and ultimately get to harvest.
And we also want to keep in mind public safety.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. We have one more quick follow-up question.
It's very quick, and I would like to follow up Doc Anderson's question, so that we can get an idea of a perspective on this conversation that we just had, the difference between 0.3 and 1%. Would you have any knowledge of THC levels in recreational products that are sold in other states legally?
Sure. THC levels in states like Colorado are usually going to be around 20+%.
20+%
on THC.
So we're
usually
talking about
24 to 25.
0.3 to 1, but recreational products where people actually,
Right.
you know, get high off of them,
Exactly.
are running at 20%. Can it exceed that in some cases?
Say that again?
Is 20% a maximum?
No.
is that a floor?
Usually you see it go up to about 25, 26%. You know, they breed that stuff out. It's definitely not your 70s marijuana anymore. So, but I would point out to the committee that there is an amendment to the state's medical program that would raise their limit to 5% there for the Compassionate Use Act. So it's kind of interesting to see how those are.
Do you know if that's backed by Texas Medical Association or?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
All right. No other questions for this witness? Appreciate you being here. All right.
Appreciate you.
Members, we need to be on the House floor in a few minutes, so we're going to resume this hearing after the House completes its business on the floor. We have 5 witnesses remaining to testify on this particular bill, and we'll call those folks up when the hearing resumes. Chair leaves House Bill 3948 pending. Okay. So the chair lays out House Bill 3948 and offers a committee substitute. We will resume public testimony. Chair calls Sheila Hemphill. And as she's approaching, I'll just remind everybody, there's going to be members in and out. committees going on all over the place, members laying out bills, so as they move in and out, it's not because they don't care about what you're saying. It's just we've got other issues going on at the same time. Now, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please.
My name is Sheila Hemphill with the Texas Hemp Industries Association, and I am for this bill and very grateful to Representative King and Doc Anderson that has been this from the beginning in 2015 when we started on it. So thank you for all this. Yes, absolutely. I had been hopeful that some of the overreach that we saw with the DSHS.
Did you say you were for the bill?
For, yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I believe we witnessed some overreach in the DSHS rules where the law in 1325 in 2019 prohibited the processing and manufacturing into smokable products that then turned into a rule of DSHS prohibiting the retail sale of that type of product. So that was not in the law, and I believe that was an overreach of administrative rulemaking that would love to be corrected, because when you think about it, what is that doing? That is harming our retailers who are getting into this industry. And I would also like to clarify that that is a delivery method in terms of, in particular, of vaping, where I have witnessed a young man with Tourette's that we sat there and counted how many Tourette motions he had in 3 minutes, and upon inhalation of CBD product, his tics went down about less than half from that method of delivery. So what we're talking about here is a delivery method. I think we need to be doing everything we can to help get our sales tax revenue up, and I don't see why those products should be purchased out of state. And I think it's a bit much to go after the manufacturing processing, which basically has ended up of our people in the industry shipping it over to Oklahoma or other states that are legal. So we're really missing out on functionality that's seen in many states. But I do appreciate what was accomplished in this, and we support the bill, and thank you for this committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the witness? Okay. Chair calls Susan Hayes. If you could state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill as you get started. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Susan Hayes, and I am here representing a company called Wild Hempettes, and I also signed in as an individual. I am an attorney, and I am for the bill, sorry. I'm an attorney, and I found my practice has increasingly grown with cannabis clients. I've got clients all along the supply chain, from farmers to processors to, I have one client who is funding research at Texas A&M AgriLife on hemp varieties and how they do around the state. And also my husband and I have a hemp license for some land we have in West Texas. Wild Hempettes is a manufacturer that has been in the Dallas area for about 17 years. As soon as it was possible under the Farm Bill, they began processing smokable hemp products and selling them. And I also want to thank Representative King for bringing this bill, and want to point out a couple of very key things it does that's very helpful to the industry as a whole. One, as he mentioned, conforming with USDA IFR, the interim final rule, making more clear rules for research licensees. As I mentioned, I have a client who's working with A&M AgriLife and is interested in funding additional research with Texas A&M. 3, making it clear that immature plants do not have to have a lot license when they're moved, or pay fees within a license holder's property. And also making it clear that a license holder may not receive more than one negligent violation of the same kind in a growing season. But one provision that we would like to see in this bill is a repeal of language that was passed before that would purport to ban the manufacturing or processing for hemp for smoking. There's many reasons for that. One, it's not very workable since the plant grows out of the ground capable of being smoked. And what I've passed out to share with the committee is a letter from the Hemp Roundtable. That is a national hemp industry organization in support of having that repeal take place. It's also a problematic issue because hemp is a legal product, and for the government to ban the processing of something that's legal without having a clear, justifiable state interest that will hold up in courts is not only not a good practice, but ends up costing the government some money in fighting that. And if you're wondering how Wild Hemp Pets is still processing hemp, that is because there was an injunction in place against the implementation of the dishes rule that would implement that was issued by a court last fall. Also, as a practical matter, there's a lot of products being sold online. There's been discussion earlier today about the quality and regulation and testing of products. My client, Wild Hemp Pets, and other players in the industry that I represent feel that it is very important that public health and safety is monitored and that we have a reliable enforcement of the rules that are already on the book. And I'll just say is for the kind of close with, for the industry as a whole and for farmers, and I ran this business analysis last summer when I found my hands kind of idle with the pandemic and did some research on what prices farmers can get out there. The best price a farmer can get for their cannabinoid-rich or CBD or CBG-rich hemp is this high-quality smokable flower. And last summer when I was checking prices, that was a couple of $100s per pound. That is compared less to $10 a pound if you're selling that as what's called biomass in the industry for extraction and processing of CBD as a additive to other products or as a CBD oil. And I think there's other good discussion this morning about for our Texas hemp program to be viable economically and compete with other states, we need to be careful to not have any regulations that are above and beyond what the federal government does. Because when that happens, larger players leave the state. I had a client choose not to grow hemp in Texas after the regs came out last time around because they were big enough to choose. And then our smaller companies cannot compete with companies from other states if they have a heavier regulatory burden. And with that, unless the committee has any questions, that's all I have.
All right. Any questions? Don't have any? Thank you very much.
You bet.
Chair will call Jesse Williams. And let the record reflect Representative Cole is in attendance. If you could state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please.
I'm Jesse Williams. I am here representing myself, and I am testifying for this bill we have in place here. There were a few points I've had written down, took some notes while we've had other testimony taking place, kind of bolster what I wanted to talk about. First, I want to go over testing. Something we need to see in this state is independent third-party testing. We can have in-house labs that take care of stuff. It's understandable that it's going to cut costs for people to do stuff in-house and send it off all the time. But at the same notion, we need to make sure that we have a third party that's going to look at this and make sure that these items are what the producer claims they are. Anything coming into Texas, we probably need to be looking at making sure that this product is tested. Other states have different rules. We've set our own down. We need to make sure that the products that we're selling to these customers, whether it be a tincture, a smokable product, this is something safe to put in people's bodies. We had earlier where we talked about, Dr. Elias Jackson brought up a certification program. For a medical program, that seems fitting, but this is not a medical program. We're talking about something that's completely legal. It's sold on the shelf. As you guys mentioned earlier, it's sold in gas stations. At the same time, certification, Zachary Maxwell brought up earlier, private businesses do that better. I know several businesses right here in Austin, that's exactly what they do. They go to businesses, they vet them. They look to see, do you have insurance? Are you following DSHS's current rules? Are you doing what you're supposed to? Are your products labeled with QR codes, which we talk about how do you know what's in your product? Federally and state-wise, you're required to have what's called a QR code sitting on each product. That way I can take my phone, scan it, and bring up the certificate of authenticity. That alerts me to what the levels are of each substance inside that product. I know what I'm putting in my body if I'm going to risk using this product, as someone would say. As well, for these tests in these labs, we need to have some sort of audit system in place. We've got to be able to give DSHS, TDA, and DPS the toolbox to say, hey, this is how this needs to operate. You need to be able to go and check out these labs, find out their equipment's calibrated, see what they're testing, and compare them to other tests. We've got products that come in, as somebody, we've just seen it in the news, a case that came out of Houston, A shop thought they had products that they thought were completely legitimate because they were given a certificate of authenticity on their product that turned out was likely not true. And it's wise for shops. I know plenty of shops that go and do third-party testing. They tell me, hey, I have to reject a lot of product. It is not fit to go on the market. Customer got pulled over, they're going to jail. It's like CBD tincture, that's a concentrate. You're going to jail immediately. As well, we have an issue with online retailers. And as Hayes earlier talked about wild hemp beds. And we had a discussion earlier, a little box. They almost look like a cigarette box. But there are people, they go online, market spaces. They actually have physical locations in the state, have warehouses, and they run a marketplace where people sell knockoff products. And me, as the consumer, do not have a way of actually going through and weeding out to make sure if these products are an authentic product from Wild Hemp Vets, who I've talked to that company before, and they are fighting tooth and nail with these online marketplaces to get these knockoff products removed. It'd be nice to see that anybody who has an online retail space and actually has a physical space in this state where we can actually hold them in our jurisdiction and say, you will certify that this product comes from where you say it comes from, that it comes from this company. The last thing I need is something that comes from some state in some guy's garage where he's printing out his own boxes, cuts up lawn clippings, shoves it in what looks like a cigarette wrapper, and says, this is hemp. Puts a QR code on it, says, well, it's legit. According to who? Should I have to go to a third-party lab every time I buy a product to ensure? Or should we have third-party labs and these retailers actually assessing to make sure it's a legitimate product? As well, we've talked about the ban on smokable hemp. The way we set it down, it's very arbitrary, it's very capricious, and because of that, it definitely shows an undue burden. When I'm watching this court case, and it's because we want to. It's like, really? Is that how we're handling business? We just want to? We didn't imply anything in the last bill that said, hey, you can't sell this. It seems kind of strange to me that if I did it at my home, which they argued was perfectly legal, I could roll my own smokable hemp joint, as they would call it, and that was perfectly fine. But if me and my buddies got ready to get together, did the same thing that's legal, and said, well, you know what? I'd like to make some money off the work that I've done. No, you can't do that. Even if I went and got all the appropriate licenses, no, you can't do that. Isn't that the strangest business model you ever heard of? I mean, it boggles my mind. I don't know about y'all. And as far as the prevalence that they state, if y'all want, I have it pulled up on my phone. We have what's called a NARC-2 test. They're using these in border towns. It's a little chemical kit. And it says susceptible, low THC, susceptible, high THC content. Officer can do a field test within minutes and know, is this likely hemp or is this likely marijuana? But we're hearing over and over and over, oh, we have no way of quickly assessing. We have no way of knowing this. We have tests available. We can start the right presumption on this. It's perfectly doable. And I wish Representative Toth was here. I was here the other night for his House Bill 99, where Grand Prairie Chief of Police stopped and talked about resources. I've heard lots of bills today about resources. I'm talking about going after bad actors in the state. 4 hours. It literally said, you can ask him, they brought up 4 hours of resources used on arresting people for what they suspect with marijuana cases. In that hearing, we talked about taking Class B misdemeanors down to C. And a police chief literally said that they're pretty much doing that, but spending 4 hours on it because that's what their community wants. And I don't doubt that's what their community wants, Chair. They want to see what I'm talking about, these bad actors. They want to see those people have to pay a penalty for this. But they're not going after that. They're going after the guy in the car.
And I just have to remind you, we have to keep our comments specific to
I
Commissioner
understand.
House Bill 3948. Appreciate your testimony on that, but
I'm saying,
we gotta
and
keep
he,
it
I'm just saying,
specific to
he
this
can
bill.
attest to the situation at hand. We've just witnessed this last couple days. But we need to have clear guidance for these issues, to go after the bad actors. We don't. It's going to be a mess. That's where the public health crisis happens. That's literally the issue. We have a lot of great people in this industry. But the bad actors, they say this was a Wild West item for a while. And that's who shines when it's the Wild West, is the bad actors. And we've got to be able to go after them and say, hey, you've messed up. You're going to get a fine for this. That's my bit of it. If y'all have any questions, I'm free to talk about it.
You bet. Are there any questions for the witness? Nope. Okay. We appreciate your testimony.
Well, I thank you for your time and your patience to listen to me.
You bet. Thanks for being here. All right. Chair calls Coleman Hempill. If you could state your name, your position on the bill, and who you represent.
Thank you, Chairman Burns, member of the committee. My name is Coleman Hempill, president of the Texas Hemp Industries Association. Also sit on the National Hemp Association Standing Committee of hemp organizations that represents over 75,000 members and followers of those organizations. I really appreciate Representative King's bill. I think this bill really does conform a lot of the best elements of the USDA final rule. The expansion of the pre-harvest testing window is certainly a great protection for our farmers. But I will say that there are still some looming issues that really come from those USDA final rules. Both in the Texas and the federal statute, hemp is defined as 0.3% or less Delta-9 THC. And in the USDA rules, they created a new term for total THC, which is a more burdensome definition that's not found in the statute. What I would propose is that we add to our definition of hemp in the ag section by saying no more than 0.3% or less Delta-9 and no more than the federal limit for negligence, which is now been set at 1% total THC. Being in the space and really being part of this legislation for the last 5 years and being very involved in the testing space, I will say that a majority of your plants tested 30 days prior to harvest will be compliant. But that finished product, and really at any point that you get above 5 to 6% CBD, which is still a level that's below a profitable value for that crop, you're going to be right at that 0.3 total THC. And I would say a vast majority of crops, when they are finished a harvest, are between 0.3 and 1% total THC. These are the same products that have been sold for the last 5 years. These are the same non-intoxicating elements, and this language that I've shared with your offices would be a protection for our farmers and really just fall in line with the science and facts of those products. Some other issues that Jesse touched on is an issue around the registration of labs right now. Currently, TDA is registering out-of-state laboratories from states like California and Oregon that, through their rulemaking process, have allowed as high as a 30% variance in testing. Again, there's issues with people receiving COA, certificates of analysis, from other states, thinking that they're selling a legal product, but when those products are confiscated in the state, and it's been like 1 to 2 cases a week for the last several weeks, those products have a much higher Delta-9 level than what they were marketed and sold. I think both from a jurisdictional standpoint as well as bolstering Texas businesses, we should be doing our testing in the state. You know, I know some of the concerns around that was that there would be price fixing, that there's not enough capacity. And when we started this program 2 years ago, that may have been the case. Texas now, has some of the fastest turnaround times, some of the most competitive low pricing for that testing, and we can absolutely handle that. That would make Texas really a beacon for how testing should be done nationwide. Other issues is we've had continual growing fees for transportation of products. One of the systems that exist in different controlled industries, whether that's alcohol, supplements, pharmaceuticals, is to allow for in-house testing and that documentation to be present when shipping that to that third party. We shouldn't have to be paying the Department of Agriculture for the protection around those products if they can be produced in-house and then reconfirmed by that third party. So it's simply allowing TDA and the Department of State Health Services to create rules that allow for that in-house testing and the transport of those products to protect both the producer as well as the lab. It's also helpful to the labs to have more data points to connect to that piece of information, and that's going to be a huge efficiency for different producers. Last, and it was touched on, one of the highest land value uses is from consumable hemp products that can be vaped. And as was stated earlier, it's a very viable delivery mechanism. At this point, the state has not demonstrated that there's any harm from those products. We know that they're not intoxicating products. These are products that have been sold on the market. And again, not scratching the language prohibiting the process and manufacturing, as was stated before, puts us in a position where we can grow this in the state. It has to be processed and manufactured elsewhere, and then can be brought back into the state, because there is no statutory prohibition against the retail sales of those products, and that's still currently being litigated. So all of these sections really, focus on protecting our farmers and liability, expanding the different genetic potential for those farmers between 0.3 and 1% by leaning on that federal language of boosting the negligence level, which they've done in the final rule, and putting that in that definition. And the other sections are really more focused around public safety and making sure that the products that are being sold in the state are what they say that they are. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions for this witness? All right. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, sir.
Chair calls Sean Salvage? Savahi. I was 50-50 on that one. Thank you so much. If you could please restate your name and your position on the bill and who you represent, please.
Yes, I'm Sean Salvaje. My position is in favor, and I'm representing myself as a Texas veteran and an aspiring farmer. You've heard a lot of testimony today, and I'm not going to take up much time because you've heard from the experts. I'm someone who is expanding in this space as a business owner and a minority business owner and a woman. And what I have found with the previous bill before we saw what we have here, which expands access, basically we're helping our farmers. And I can't say how exciting this is, because this is a real opportunity for Texas farmers to lead the nation and lead the way in an industry that is going to be worth an expansive amount of money. And so for farmers, it's important that we don't tie their hands behind their back, right? When they're trying to create progress, they're trying to create an industry for Texas, and they're trying to help us drive into the future. So I wanted to come and testify in support of this bill, not knowing who all would be here. I'm so glad that we have all these experts who are able to answer your questions. And just to let you know, for hardworking Texans like myself, veterans who are invested in the growth of our state and the future of our development, this bill really helps us to move forward and create progress. So it's exciting to see, especially when we're talking about farmers who are lacking certain resources. Maybe they don't have deep pockets. This is an opportunity. This creates opportunities for people to do the right thing, to grow and expand in this space, and do it in a way that's in compliance, which is so critical and important, as you've heard. So I will yield the rest of the time. I've been here before, and we had some certain limitations. I'm not seeing that here, but I want to respect your time, and I respect the opinions of the experts who've gone before me. I support them wholeheartedly, and just wanted to support this bill as we move forward. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any questions for Ms. Savaje? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3948? If not, Chair recognizes Representative King to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I appreciate the opportunity to bring this before you today. And I appreciate all the folks that came up here to testify. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I mean, there's probably some out there that would like to ratchet this down, and then I know there's a whole lot of them that would like to open it up more. We went through the same thing when we passed the bill 2 years ago, and so you have to find that middle ground that can get you through the House and the Senate and the governor. And so this is what we're trying to do here with some of the issues that have come up in the implementation over the last couple of years. And I will be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Are there any questions for Representative King?
If not, well then, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I close and request your favorable consideration as soon as possible.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your work on this issue, and we'll consider it. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this time, House Bill 3948 will be left pending.